Hello, this is Ray Edwards once again from learncopy.com and webcopywriting.com with another installment of copywriting tips and tricks. The power of argument structures in copywriting is our subject for today. As a university freshman, one of the general courses I had to take involved learning the fallacies of argument, and the textbook was the well-known Straight and Crooked Thinking by Robert H. Thewles. Now, debunking arguments was the most exciting part of this course for me, as I uncovered the tricks politicians and marketers use to quote-unquote fool people into agreeing with them. Now, the only other book in my estimation that came close to that of Thewles was Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. Then I was mainly playing on the defensive as the consumer. Now I find myself on the offensive as a marketer and copywriter, trying to persuade people to take action. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm trying to dupe people by using fallacious arguments, but I still must be aware of these strategies. One of the most effective ways to start a sales letter, and which I often employ, is by using the if-then statement, such as, if you are thinking about hiring a copywriter, that is called a protasis, then this may be the most important message you ever read, the apodosis. Now, the if is followed by a condition, and the then is followed by a benefit. Now, another example of this type of statement as used in a headline is, if you give me 5 minutes, I'll show you the most powerful way to get free traffic to your website. This statement is very powerful because it bypasses the reader's critical filter, and I just used the same technique in this last sentence. And here's why. The statement is structured in a logical way, and therefore the reader accepts it without much probing or doubt. In other words, if the statement looks logical, then it must be logical, at least to the reader's mind. And this, of course, is a fallacy. So, an inferential statement that is structured logically can easily sneak under the radar as being truth. It's similar to, we both know that, or therefore, or implies that, or obviously, and because. You see, you state the data as though it is a well-known fact, and the person accepts it without question. Now, by definition, a deductive argument is made up of three important parts. 1, the premise. 2, the inference. And 3, the conclusion. So a proposition is a simple statement of fact which could be true or false. For example, Texas is the largest state in America, which is a false proposition. The building block of any argument is its propositions. Now, the premises are the assumptions on which the argument is built, or the reason for accepting the argument. A conclusion in one argument can turn up as a premise for another argument. Needless to say, in any argument, you must always state your premises. Read through any written arguments and you'll see these statements introduced by words such as obviously, or since, or because, and assume. Now that we have the premises in place, then we can move on to our step-by-step process called inferences. Once one proposition is accepted, then you can follow to show how it leads logically to the acceptance of the other. Some of the inferences will be valid and some may be invalid. The final proposition will be the conclusion of the argument, which you are trying to prove in the first place. Now, the danger here is that you can construct a valid argument from false premises and reach a true conclusion. Now, you may need to listen to that again. For example, a premise: all the best copywriters live in Florida. Premise: Ray Edwards is a copywriter who lives in Florida. Conclusion: Ray Edwards is one of the best copywriters. But on the other hand, you cannot start with a true premise and use valid deductive inferences to reach a false conclusion. In other words, a valid argument doesn't make a valid conclusion because the initial premises could be false. If this all sounds confusing to you, it's only because of the language we are using, as this method is the basis of all mathematical arguments. So you are accustomed to reasoning this way while doing math, but just using different symbols. Now, since we are so accustomed to this structured logic in arguments, we become less critical when we read statements with this familiar structure. It's the brain's way of saving energy rather than going through the tedious task of analyzing these statements. Just think about it. You don't question whether a stop sign is a stop sign while driving. You just automatically stop without consciously processing the meaning of the sign. And that's the real power of if-then statements and headlines. People read them and accept them because the brain is just too lazy to do otherwise. I mean, who wants to go through each proposition and premise and inference and then evaluate the validity of the argument? Don't underestimate the power of laziness to persuade the mind. So be sure to use the if-then formula, and may all your conclusions be as valid as your arguments.